Lunch. I am Gabe Neitzel, excited to be joined by one half of Pack's What She Said podcast. She is Perri Goldstein. Perri, thank you so much for the time jumping on and talking a little green and gold.
Thank you for having me. I'm very happy to talk green and gold anytime.
Well, so let's start. I mean, we're in the dead of the off season, and it's about to even get. At least we've had like OTAs and little sprinkles of stories and mandatory minicamp. Who's there? Who's deciding they don't want their workout bonuses like Jair Alexander? We're about to hit the real dead part here before training camp opens up at the end of July. When you just take that step back and that 10,000-foot view of the offseason, give me one thing that you've liked about the offseason and one thing that's left you a little skeptical.
Ooh, good. I really like that the majority of the team has been together for a while now. I know you mentioned Jair wasn't up there, but I think besides Jair, Sewell, a handful of like depth guys, this team has been practicing together even when it wasn't mandatory. So I'm loving that, like, new team, new QB1, kind of get same offense, but just like this core hasn't had any real meaningful snaps together yet. So as much time as possible, super necessary. And it seems like they're getting that done. Skeptical. So you'll learn about me. I'm not a skeptical fan. I'm an optimistic fan. So, but obviously, like, the main question mark here is what's Jordan going to look like when he's finally under center week 1. And unfortunately, we're just not going to know that until September.
Well, and it doesn't even, to me, it doesn't even matter what he looks like in week 1. Like, to me, it's more important of what he looks like in week 16, 17, 18. Like, how much has he progressed? Like, obviously, I would love for him to come out and throw for 2 touchdowns and have a ridiculous one the way that Aaron did when he made his debut as the starter against the Vikings on Monday Night Football back in 2008. I don't know how realistic that is, because my biggest complaint, I'll tell you this, right? I want to know what you think about this. My biggest complaint right now is the lack of veteran pass catchers. And I think there's an excitement, certainly, with a young core that can grow together. But when Brett came in, he had Sterling. When Aaron came in, he had Greg Jennings, and then, James Jones and Jordy, and they continued to add to that group, and it grew. But he also had Donald Driver.
Yeah.
So the lack of a veteran pass catcher, A, to kind of be a security blanket, B, to help the young receivers along when the oldest receiver is Jeff Cotton at 26 years old and nobody knows who Jeff Cotton is. I don't think that's necessarily a good thing for Jordan and his development. I would just like to have one security blanket out there to make me feel a little bit better about how this team, as young it is, especially offensively, is developing.
Yeah, I totally get that perspective. But I think if you look at the offense, you look at pass catchers / weapons, and you do have a security blanket because you have Aaron Jones. And I know he's not a wide receiver, right? But he's that vet. He's instrumental in the passing game, and they're going to lean on him a bunch. So I think when it comes to like vet presence to bring the young guys up to speed, him and even AJ Dillon kind of fill that role a little bit. Would I be upset if they brought in a vet at this point? No, because I think, to your point, there is a lot of value there. But the point of the Donald Drivers, right, was to bridge that gap. And any vet at this point isn't going to do that. They're going to be brand new to the playbook. So there's that kind of like push and pull with it, I think.
Sure. And I think when I look at the wide receiver position, that's just kind of the story of they've swung and missed at the guys that they have tried to draft to be that guy that can be the veteran to help these guys along. But the one thing I am really excited about, and I don't know if it necessarily translates to wins and losses in 2023. I think maybe in 2024 more. I'm excited about the energy that the young team can bring. Like this young team of growing together. And I mean, I do, 7 to 9, Jen, Gabe, and Chewy, working with Mark Chmura every day and hearing him tell stories of when he was growing in 92, 93, 94 with Brett. And then they have Robert Brooks. They trade away Sterling. Antonio Freeman comes in. It just, you start piling these young guys who are hungry together growing. That makes me excited that you might have a core kind of growing together. And again, I don't know if that translates to a bunch of wins in 2023, but I think that's what can excite me as a Packers fan this upcoming season.
I could not agree more. And I think your point too, I don't know if that's wins in 2023 is really apt, right? Because maybe not in 2023, but it's going to be huge in 2024. And again, in the future, if Jordan stays the starter, right? Like this year is going to be full of growing pains. I am expecting it to be a little bit of a roller coaster, but like you said, they're going to do it all together. And that's why I started this by saying, I love that they've been together now through OTAs, through like non-mandatory stuff. You know, they're going out to California and they're going to work out with Jordan Love. And Jair even said he's been there since April, even though he wasn't there for OTAs. So they're going to go through it all together. And I think in the long run, it's going to be worthwhile. Now, obviously, from a fan perspective, being a little bit of like immediate gratification, you want to see those wins this season. You don't want to have to go through any kind of like 500 season this year, but I think you have to think a little bit long-term with it, and it's going to be worth it.
Yeah, I mean, when Brett came in 1992, they were 9-7. They missed the playoffs, and then they were able to, start building off of that. Aaron's first year, they were 6-10.
Right.
They blew some leads, but they were 6-10. You knew you had something in Aaron. I think there was some excitement of, I think they've got some pieces. Let's start going. And then, they hit the home runs with Clay and BJ Raji in the draft and the defense, and everything just starts growing together. The offense certainly has me excited. I don't know how much we're going to see that necessarily translate to wins and losses. I am curious, though, since you've described yourself as the optimal fan. I am very curious how you are spinning the defense in your own mind, because Perri, I've got questions. I got a lot of questions.
I do too. I'm not going to lie to you. The end of last season, I said, I love this run, right? This month-long run of this defense looking like everything we thought it would be is super fun. Except my problem with it is it's going to mean that we just saved Joe Barry's job.
Yep.
And at the end of the day, I actually don't know if that was the right decision. Now, again, this is hot seat year. Like this defense is either going to be top 10 or you're out. So, or at least we hope, right? We said that about Donovan first forever, but we hope. But, this young offense is going to need this defense to step up. Like they are going to need the defense, just like we saw it last year, to hold them into some close games. We've seen that they're capable. That's my one piece, is that we have seen the flashes of capability when everyone is healthy, when everyone's on the field, when everything's clicking. They made some lower level coaching changes. I don't know. There's going to be like some good energy. Getting Rashawn back is going to be huge. I mean, the difference when he's on the field versus not. And then you hope that they, got a home run with some of their draft picks. Like there's not much more I can say other than that. I just hope that they harness what worked well last year and try to like take it from there, because the inconsistency on the defensive side of the ball is going to be a huge, huge problem when the offense is going to be super inconsistent this year as well.
The problem I have with the defense is kind of similar to what I had going into last offseason. And the expectations have now been tempered because of what happened last year. But there's just, outside of Jair, and if you really wanted to, you could throw an if on him. I don't think with the way he performed late in the season, and seemingly Joe Barry started using him the way that Jair's comfortable with, put him on Justin Jefferson in that second to last game of the season, shut down Jefferson, had him have the literally worst game of his career from a production standpoint. So I feel good about Jair. I feel everybody else, you start going down the depth chart, Perri, it's if. Well, if Kenny Clark starts playing up to that potential again, if Devondre Campbell plays like he did 2 years ago, if Rasul Douglas plays like he did 2 years ago, which I think he will if they keep him on the outside, if Quay Walker continues to develop, it just kind of seems like there's a lot of ifs with a lot of players, and some of those ifs will become true, but not all of them. Just from a pure, just mathematical, probability standpoint, I don't see all of them coming to fruition. And then you throw Joe Barry into the mix, and I become very skeptical.
Yeah. I mean, I think those ifs happen if the scheme is right. That's my biggest if, right? Because I believe, like I said, we've seen it. We know who Kenny Clark can be. And I think now that there's a little bit more like legitimate help along the line, then we'll see that, right? You want to see Devonte Wyatt take more snaps because he looked great in the very limited you saw. You said it, using Jair the way he's meant to, keeping Sewell outside. Don't know what's going to happen in the slot. Don't know what's going to happen when Stokes comes back, but you get that pass rush working. Like this team has all the makings of it. It's just a matter of like, is Barry going to use them schematically the way that they're supposed to? Because this secondary, to me, if you ask them to play man coverage, they're going to be one of the best in the league. But you start getting that like soft zone with them, and that's when you start seeing them struggle. And that's all coaching, in my opinion.
Yeah, I think you're 100% right there. And you could see it last year. You mentioned some of the lower level coaching changes they made with Gray no longer being the cornerbacks coach. And he was obviously very not on the same page as Joe Barry. They've now got someone who probably will be. And I think that probably led to some of the things that Jair Alexander was saying in the media early last season and some of the struggles that they had in the zone coverages. And we don't need to even talk about the safety position because who knows what that's going to be. But the other thing I have that gives me skepticism about Joe Barry, because I'm excited about the way some of these players can be versatile. Like, I think that Lucas Van Ness can be someone who's versatile, where, if he starts, progressing, I think on some certain passing downs, you can slide him to the interior. And then you still have Rashawn Gary and Preston Smith rushing from the outside, and you can do some cool things. Without saying it and kind of being quiet during the questions that were asked to the defensive coaching staff, it seems that they want to be creative with Quay Walker. But again, I've got questions about, can Joe Barry, who's had issues running just his base stuff, when he starts wanting to have more exotic looks, is that actually going to work with some of the versatility they may have with some of the young, exciting players?
I totally agree. And I mean, you heard a lot of talk last offseason, right? Like moving Savage to the star and like all these ideas. And you're like, great. On paper, that sounds fantastic. And they have such a young team. Like Goot has put so much capital into super young athletic freaks on the defensive side of the ball. And it's just a matter of now, how do you mold them into what this defense wants to be, wants to play like, and do you have the creative enough defensive coordinator now to not only have those ideas, but like actually put them into practice when necessary, depending on what offense you're playing, depending on what looks you're, there's so many variables to it. So again, I think we saw some flashes last year, right? You saw Quay blitz a little bit and that was super fun. And, you can maybe move some guys around again, I think on the defensive line, because I just thought like the Dean Lowrys and the Jerron Reeds of the world kind of actually maybe held the line back because they're not versatile players and they're not the most athletic. And now you're getting a little bit of that shift. So to me, it's a we'll see. You're going to also have to get creative on the back end because you said it, the safety position is like a humongous question mark. I mean, we're getting Darnell Savage, who's on his again, make or break season, and Anthony Johnson Jr., like Jonathan Owens.
Owens.
I'm all for it. I hope Jonathan Owens crushes it. But just huge question marks there. And, you can have the best cornerbacks in the world, but if the safeties on the back end are not holding up what they have to do and they're getting passed off and they don't know where they're going, and we saw all this miscommunication again last year, it's not going to matter what Jair is able to do. It's not going to matter that Jair can shut down Justin Jefferson. So I'd like to see the creativity actually deployed, and I'd like to see the communication.
Well, but that's it. Like the communication has to clear up in order for any sort of creativity to happen. If you can't run your base stuff because the communications aren't there. I'm really curious what Darnell Savage's headspace has to be, because it's very obvious he would not be a part of this team had they not exercised the fully guaranteed fifth-year option, which makes me wonder if that's part of the reason they ended up kind of hedging their bet with Jordan Love's fifth-year option and ended up signing that contract that isn't probably going to be worth as much. And maybe Goody's trying to hedge a bet there a little bit after, oh yeah, we're definitely picking up that option for Darnell, and then going, oh crap, we now have to pay this guy $8 million. It's fully guaranteed. There's nothing we can do. I wonder what his headspace is. I wonder how the coaching staff approaches him to try to get him to be a productive player, because he had so much promise and excitement those first two seasons.
He did. I mean, if I'm not an NFL coach, so this is just me, like from a psychological, I would want to actually be getting him out of his head. Because as someone who overthinks everything, I mean, I'm sure he's like, I have to do this. I have to do this. I have to be this guy. This year's so big, so big, so big. And if I'm a coach, I'm like, let's get out of your head and let's trust what your traits have shown us you can
trust
do.
Those instincts.
Exactly. That's kind of the mindset that I would have going into this. And then again, have him lean on the rest of his DB room, right? That DB room is super close. You heard at the end of last season, they started group chat, they started talking more, started watching film together, like lean on Jair, lean on Sewell, just lean on the guys who I think a little bit you trust a little bit more that they know what they're doing. I actually think, I know Adrian Amos had a down season, but I actually think losing him in that room was a huge loss, just from like a knowledge vet perspective. So again, talking about vets, I actually wouldn't hate bringing in a safety. They kind of did with Jonathan Owens, I guess, but that room is just so full of question marks. There's nobody that I'm pointing to being like, well, don't worry, we have him. Because that's how you felt with Amos last year. It's like, maybe he's lost a step. Maybe he's not the speediest guy in the world, but Amos is typically like where he's supposed to be at all times. And there's no one like that in that room right now.
Yeah, I mean, he's a veteran. He probably missed a couple more tackles than we would all preferred, but he was at least where he was supposed to be. I don't know if these safeties are going to end up where they're supposed to be. It's going to be interesting to watch, certainly. Going from the defense, let's go back over to the offensive side of the ball. I feel like there's been a lot written of the OTAs and mandatory minicamp. It seems that Romeo Doubs is getting a lot of the love this time of year. Where do you come down? Who do you think ends up being wide receiver one? Is it Doubs in your mind, or is it Christian Watson, who flashed for those 4 games late last season?
No, it's Christian Watson till further notice.
Okay.
I think Doubs is making the case for a great wide receiver too. And this team needs that, right? This team has had the wide receiver one for forever. And then the depth after that, right? And to me, there's unequivocal wide receiver one in Christian Watson. And I think that just goes, you saw what he was able to do over the course of the season, and he was a higher draft pick. And I just think based on that, you're going to get that. Now, Doubs went out and he practiced with Love. And I think you're seeing that connection now in OTAs and in mini camps. But let's see what happens when the pads come on. You know what I mean? Like, this is shorts. This is, and I don't want to take anything away, because I also think he had a great rookie season until he got hurt, and then he had a little bit trouble coming back. Fair enough. But no, to me, it's not really a question.
Yeah, I still, there's so much growth I need to see out of Christian Watson, I guess. The 4-game stretch was undeniably unbelievable. His numbers really weren't that different than Marquez Valdes-Scantling's rookie year. And that,
so different, though.
I understand. I get it, but it's just, he's got the speed, and there's just so much more refinement that has to happen within his game. And that's what I'm looking for. We know you can run that 9 route. You can run over the top of someone. You can run that crosser and run away from people the way you did with the touchdown that he had against the Eagles. Like, you can run away from people and you can have those big plays. But what separates the really good wide receivers from the Valdes-Scantlings or the McCole Hardmans of the world that have that speed is they can do all the little things in between as well. And that's where I want to see the growth out of Christian Watson this year.
Yeah, totally fair. I can see them using him on more of like the underneath stuff as well this year. And I think if you get him to be successful at that, and you have him as the speed threat, then he becomes the well-rounded guy that you want to see as your wide receiver one. I also you don't know what that connection was with Rodgers. You know what I mean? Rodgers is notoriously difficult with rookies. Like, you know, he even said, I watch film and I realize how often Watson was open and I didn't even get him the ball in that instance. So I think with Love, and you want to see him kind of develop into, like you said earlier, that wide receiver security blanket, right? You want them to become QB1, wide receiver one together. I think Love's going to take those shots when Watson's open that Rodgers didn't.
Yeah, no, I think
the stats I think are going to look better, maybe not better, but he's going to have more targets, I think, than he did with Rodgers.
Well, which is, I mean, again, I don't know if he ends up with the yards per catch that he did, right? But if that goes down in the name of getting more targets, just getting the ball in his hands more often, I don't think that's, when you're looking at yards per catch, I don't think that's the first stat that anybody looks at when they're evaluating wide receivers. So that's just going to be an interesting development. And I'm really curious how they use tight ends this year. I've got a feeling they want to go more 2 tight ends, and again, maybe this is just bias because I work with a guy who was a tight end in the NFL, and maybe he's biased towards tight ends, but he makes great points when it comes to, after quarterback, tight end's probably one of the toughest positions to learn, Because not only do you have to know everything the wide receivers know in terms of the route tree and the combinations and all those things, you then also have to know all the different run combinations and all those because you're a big blocker in the run game. There's a lot of information being thrown at you. And it just takes, even first round, tight ends, it just takes them a little bit longer. I'm not expecting either of these guys to be able to come in and go, oh man, look at those guys. They just had a monster year. Because there's so much information. I think tight ends, and I think you've seen it across the league, that position just takes a little bit longer to develop than, we've seen first round wide receivers come in and have huge impacts. Not too many first round tight ends have come in and been world beaters the way we've seen Jamar Chase, Justin Jefferson at all.
Totally. Absolutely. And I mean, you said it, you kind of look at like the TJ Hawkinsons or, some of the other like
Kyle Pitts.
Kyle Pitts is a perfect example, right? Taken super high. Everyone has super high expectations. Now, granted, he was drafted to a not very good offense.
Yeah, it was.
We take that with a grain of salt, right?
The quarterback situation, not ideal in Atlanta.
Right. But the point still stands that like he's literally your everything in that offense and he's still not producing. And I think it just goes to show how difficult the tight end position is in the league. And like, you're not going to hit on a Travis Kelce or a George Kittle as a rookie. You're just not. Mm-hmm. It took Travis Kelce probably till his third, fourth season to be the guy that we know and love. Mm-hmm. And so I, as a fan, and I tell my dad this, I tell everyone that I'm like, temper the expectations. We love that they finally kind of put some stock into that position. We love the way they look so far in camp, but again, we're not in pads yet. We're in shorts. And this team in particular, and this offense is going to ask a lot of these tight ends. And you mentioned it already in the run game, blocking. That's going to be, I think, where we see the most impact as a rookie. Are you getting in there and doing kind of that dirty work for this run game? And then we're going to build off that and we're going to start getting you the ball. I said this on the Pack-A-Day podcast. I'm on, every other week with Andy Herman, and I got some heat for it, but I'm going to repeat it because I mean it. I actually think if you're going to see a tight end produce in the passing game this year, it's going to be Josiah DeGuara, simply because he's been in this offense for a few years. He knows the playbook, and he's really, really tight with Jordan Love. So if he can't produce, don't expect the rookie tight ends to produce either.
When it comes to Josiah, Tyler Davis wasn't a draft pick. In terms of the other tight ends who have experience on this roster, like Josiah was a draft pick. You expect him in here now, as he continues to progress, like this should be the year that he should be able to kind of take that step forward and show. I don't think it's that hot of a take. I don't know why you would take.
I appreciate that. I just think like they used him a little bit differently. And again, look, he tore his ACL his rookie season. So total wash. They used him a little bit differently last year. I thought the run game hummed when he was in there, right? Mm-hmm. And you don't get the stats. You don't really get the credit except for, crazy people like us who notice these things, like when he's lead blocking out there for AJ Dillon, like that's the stuff. And I think though, like I said, those building blocks are going to lead to more. But I think on top of that, his connection with Jordan Love is just going to shine through a little bit this season.
But he has to, to me, he has to produce in the passing game. I think they've used him, as you mentioned, kind of in that H-back role almost because again, he was the third tight end last year behind Big Dog and Robert Tonyan. Like he was the third tight end. They asked him to block. I think he passed that with flying colors. Now show that you can be more of the edge blocker as part of this scheme and try to build onto. I think he's got some athleticism to him. Try to add now some of those pass catching things because it's going to take the other guys a while. And, maybe 1 week it's Kraft who's up in kind of that second tight end. Maybe it ends up being Tyler Davis, but starting the year, tight end 1 has to be Josiah DeGuara because of all the things that we just listed and all the other information that's being thrown at the rookie tight ends.
Right. And look, is he meant to be tight end 1? No. You drafted Luke Musgrave for that, right? Mm-hmm. Eventually, you want to see him surpass that role. And you said it. Josiah is an H-back, fullback, tight end, hybrid guy. Matt LaFleur loves him. He's creative, etc. Your true tight end 1 is going to be Luke Musgrave. But he's just not going to be that week 1. Now, if he is, great. Like, I'll eat crow. I don't care.
Oh, yeah.
I'll be
fantastic
any day. But, like, you can't put that on a rookie tight end. You can't expect that.
No. When it comes to the running backs, it's such an interesting year because Aaron Jones takes less money to stick around, which good on him. But the cap number, not sustainable next year. A.J. Dillon's in the last year of his contract. I'm really curious to see what happens there. Can A.J. Dillon kind of take that step forward that he failed to last year? And there was a great article that Jason Wilde did at Madison.com where he was just kind of talking about his headspace last year and how desperate he wants to. And if you're a Packers fan, it's everything you want to hear. Like, he's so desperate to be here. He's like, oh, I got to break this. So they signed me to a contract so I can stick around. It's all the things you want to hear. And hopefully he can kind of get back to some of the potential that he showed year one, year two. I think A.J. Dillon, to me, because I think we've come to know what to expect out of Aaron Jones. He can be an explosive guy. You can use him in the passing game. Some of the inconsistencies are some of the things I pointed out in years past, and some of that maybe be due to usage. But I think A.J. Dillon is going to be such a big key to whether or not this offense can be successful, because he's really only he's probably their second best option right now offensively in terms of what he's been able to show consistently what he did year one, year two of his career.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, the Packers have just like kind of hit home runs, I think, with their running backs in the last few seasons. I don't even like thinking about Aaron Jones now on this team, so we're just going to put him in that.
Okay.
I just like can't even think about it. Like, to me, I'm like, he's retiring a Packer, right? Like if he hits, I think it's like 1,100 yards this year. He comes like fifth all time in yards from scrimmage. I mean, he is just like somehow still underrated too. I love Aaron Jones, but I agree with you, A.J. Dillon. My thing with A.J. Dillon is that he's such a rhythm back, right? You can't just stick him in on like a random third down, take him out, right? Like, he kind of needs to get rolling
to get him
going. Yeah. And this offense last year just simply didn't get rolling, period. So I don't really know if that's like on him, because it was start and stop. And we don't have to get into all the problems of the 2022 offense, but like, it just wasn't conducive to A.J. Dillon's skills. And so I'm hopeful maybe a little bit this year you can get him into those rhythms, and you're going to, we say this every year, but hopefully lean on the run game a little bit more this year, and I think he will have those opportunities because he's such a complete back. The Packers have two complete backs, two backs who can run the football, two backs who can catch the football, and two backs that can pass protect. And it's just like, when do you take him out? When do you switch him? I mean, it's actually probably a really difficult thing for Matt LaFleur to decide of like, how do you rotate these guys in? Because they're both so good at all three things you want your running backs to be good at.
If they don't run the ball more this year, then we know I've always assumed coaches don't actually want to run the football because it's a lot more fun to dial up that pass play that goes for a touchdown than run the ball for 3 yards. Because every coach in the history of the NFL has at some point stepped up to their podium and said, oh, we just need to run the ball more. And again, for this Packer iteration of the Packers, it goes back to McCarthy with LaFleur. Like, they've all said it. And I understand why you want to run it when Aaron Rodgers is your quarterback, right? Like, it makes sense to me. But you got to help Jordan Love. And the way you help Jordan Love is by running the football more this year. So this is the true litmus test of Matt LaFleur actually wants to run the football more.
It is. It really is. And like, you want to see Love's arm. We're going to see Love's arm, but you also want to give him time. And if, like we said earlier, we're going to be kind of hoping that the defense carries this offense a little bit more as they get through those growing pains. You also want the offense to be staying on the field as long as humanly possible. And you run the football by doing that, right? You have to sustain drives and you have to take chunks of time off the clock. The Packers, when they ran the ball, anytime they run the ball, when Aaron Jones gets 15 plus touches in a game, I think the Packers have only lost one game, right? Like, the stats show it, but I understand those in-game decisions. And like you said, you have Aaron Rodgers. You want to be throwing the football. But yeah, I mean, if they don't run the ball this year, they're not going to run the ball.
It's not going to happen. If it doesn't happen this year, it's just not going to happen. Matt LaFleur doesn't actually want to run the football. Perri, I want to say thank you so much for jumping on Packed Lunch. Tell people where they can hear all the great Packers takes that you have, even though like the one hot take you gave, I ended up agreeing with, so it wasn't even that spicy of a take. But the hot takes that you're giving, where can we hear those typically?
I appreciate the support. It was so fun having me on. Thank you so much. You can follow us at Pax What She Said podcast on Twitter. PWSS podcast is the handle. Maggie Loney is my co-host. She is fantastic. She is our better half, as I like to say, although she'd yell at me for saying that.
She's not here. You can say that now. She's
I can
she's
say
not.
that.
She's like on vacation. Who knows if she even sees this?
Yes, she is. She's fantastic. Off seasons, once a week, anywhere you find your podcast. In season, we drop 2 episodes a week. So we're now with Odyssey Sports Network. So you have the Odyssey app. You can find us there, Spotify, Google Play, et cetera, et cetera.
All right, Perri, thank you so much. Enjoy the off season because the regular season, it's training camp. It's going to be here before you know it.
I'm so ready for it. Thanks, Gabe.
Perri Goldstein from Pax What She Said. We'll wrap up Pax Lunch tomorrow, right here at noon on ESPN Wisconsin.